Hello and welcome to the 6th Annual Predict and Prepare Videocast sponsored by Workday. I'd like to introduce today's moderator, Bill Kudik, tech columnist for Human Resource Executive.
Hello and welcome again to Workday's first studio videocast of Predict and Prepare. After 6 years, the most important online event of the year in HR technology and quickly taking its place among financial events. I'm Bill Kudik, father of the HR Technology Conference, so I should know. We're all terribly excited about finally being physically together in a studio rather than virtually together from all over, and making this event as live as it can possibly be, without you actually being here with us. You've already heard how to join by tweeting, and here's your last look at our hashtag, #Predict14. By the way, Twitter is for you to talk with each other, but realize it's all behind our backs. We won't be following this tweet stream at this table, nor taking any questions from it, just from the question box. Please ask your questions when you think of them, even though we won't answer until the end. So let me introduce our panelists. These are all our formal titles that you see, which frankly don't tell you what you really should know. Interestingly, all of us have worked on our own from 12 to 26 years after distinguished careers at big firms, except for me, of course. So they've already predicted the future of work and acted on it by putting their careers on the line, and they've won. Starting with Naomi Lee Bloom, I have introduced her dozens of times in the 24 years we've known each other. So let me simply say, no one disputes that she knows more about HR technology than anyone on the planet, though I've heard rumors of an extraterrestrial invasion of HR experts just to displace her. Brian Sommer joined Anderson Consulting 31 years ago, yes, right out of high school, where as a partner he specialized in the confluence of big HR and financial systems. For the last 12 years as an independent analyst and consultant at his firms TechVentive and Vital Analysis, he has remained at the top of the enterprise software in both areas, while still blogging for ZDNet. After working 20 years at PwC and Gartner, Vinny Merchandani founded Deal Architect, a technology strategy and negotiation firm. For 2 years, I had him convinced not to write a book until he finally broke free from my pessimism and now turns them out every 18 months, the first two for Wiley, the New Polymath, and the New Technology Elite. His focus is now on innovation, and his research will inform a lot of his predictions. Remember, you can ask questions anytime by clicking on the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. Try that now if you haven't already. You can drag and drop the box anywhere on the screen, or just leave it covering my face if you prefer to do that. So let's start with Naomi's first prediction. Buyers of core HRMS and talent management will want a deeply, organically unified HRMS talent management suite, rejecting the cost and complexity of layering or integrating talent management applications.
Well, I know that's not going to be a popular prediction, but here's the issue. When you really look at human resource management, when you really dig inside, the number and complexity of the interconnections between what's normally in core HRMS and what's normally in talent management creates a really enormous problem if you have to integrate across multiple and disparate systems. Can it be done? Anything can be done. You write enough code, we can make anything work. And those vendors who own both sides of it and are creating middleware and so on to connect the two pieces can make it work. But every dollar spent making it work is a dollar you don't have for innovation, for agility. Furthermore, in SaaS, the new applications come along really rapidly. And if I've got these things hooked together in a way that is somewhat brittle, when there's a change on one side, I have to update the interfaces. When there's a change on the other, I have to update. And we could almost get away with it when the HR department was the primary customer. But now that this is rolling out to end users and in a mobile way, they're not going to put up with starting over here with one process that works in a particular way, and now I need another process that's part of a different suite and works in a different way, even if the colors are the same, even if it is nominally and superficially integrated. So even though there are HR processes which can themselves be kept separate, background checking, payroll, their points of contact are really quite modest and fairly stable over time. But the truly integrated talent management processes, the end-to-end processes, depend so heavily on data which is in that core system: position, job, competency, organizational structure, physical location structures. Again, can it be done? We can do anything. But there is there's so much more resources that can be put into the products themselves when they are inherently integrated, when that's not an extra add-on thing we have to work on.
Great, Brian.
So let me pick up on, Naomi, when you said you didn't think this prediction was going to be popular. So let me just probe on that a little bit. I talked with 3 HR executives the other day, and I was surprised to hear them just complain a blue streak about how expensive it is for them to integrate all these HR technologies together. And one of them, maybe I must have missed a couple of HR meetings somewhere down the line, but I was surprised to find out that a couple of these executives already have IT departments inside their HR groups. That, and to your point about it is taking budget away, and frankly, when companies start popping up with pockets of IT operations and all the different functional areas, something's wrong. Something's fundamentally wrong from this on this from a cost perspective. But I don't think the problem just is going to stay just within HR and talent management, or even bleeding in some of the other related HR areas, because I think what's happening is, as we start to look at embedding other kinds of data, what I'm seeing with some of the HR analytic vendors that are coming out, that, if you will, the nominal book of record of what is a human data that companies care about is rapidly expanding. So if it's not integrated today with a limited subset of applications, it's just going to turn into chaos going forward.
What I should have said was not popular with vendors.
Oh, well, okay.
Customers love this concept because, as you say, removes a lot of their work. But if you're a vendor that's made huge investments in piece parts, and you're hooking them together hoping that that will be okay, I think that's where the lack of popularity comes in.
Can we also agree, Naomi, that the word integration just doesn't mean anything anymore?
Yes. We came of age at a time when Integrated said that there was one design and one object model, and it was built organically from there. And now that word has been degraded to mean anything we could hook together. I don't know that there's another really good word that expresses what I'm trying to describe, but fundamentally, if they're operating on different architectures and operating on different understandings of the data, how the heck do we do analytics?
Good. Let's move on. Let's consider Brian's first prediction: cloud-based financial accounting software. It's already made big inroads in the SMB space. We could name names, but we won't. And will enter the large enterprise market with some big wins in 2014, your prediction. Other financial apps are already serving large firms, and accounting apps will follow.
So I think what we have to start off with is understand what is it that customers want these days in the marketplace. What customers want is they frankly want to be out of the application software business. They need systems to run their firms, but they don't really want to be maintaining, supporting, or anything else. And they want to, full multi-tenant products, but they also want products that are very simple to retest every time a new release and all that comes out. The market's moving towards the off the on-premise world, and it's moving on to the cloud space. There's no question about that. And when you look at where things have gone, I've been doing all these interviews since 2011 with financial and HR executives. When you talk to the ones back in 2011, they're telling you these incredible stories, and they sound like they just survived the Donner Party expedition. Okay, oh, it was a tremendous deal. We were pioneers. We had no idea where we were going or what we were doing. No one could guide us or anything else.
How many of each other did they eat?
I'll leave that up to your imagination. But what was interesting about the tone in 2011 versus today? In today's world, when you talk to a CFO in a lot of companies, and you go, "So, how many cloud applications does your firm have today?" And they start rattling off without any help. They'll rattle off, "Well, we have CRM, we have a marketing automation tool, we have a talent management product, we have payroll in the cloud, we have this office automation, you name it. They've got a lot of this stuff out there." And they're not afraid of going into the cloud anymore. When I hear some of these people throw out arguments, like, "Oh, people won't put their data in the cloud." Bull. Their data's already in the cloud.
Exactly.
It's in a bunch of different clouds. It's all over the place. So, so when I look at where the markets have moved, the SMB market absolutely has been penetrated by cloud financial software and HR vendors. In the large enterprise space, I will mention a couple of vendors. There have been some budgeting, planning, treasury management, financial forecasting kind of companies like the Adaptive Planning, which I know has done a bunch of deals with a bunch of even Workday customers. Adaptive, Anaplan, Reval, Tidemark, piles of them like that, and they are already in good numbers in very large firms. Now, what's waiting, to see the encroachment of the big financial modules, and if I understood right, my reading of even Workday's latest quarter returns indicated that they've even made some big successes there as well. So I expect more of that to come.
So I am completely wrong in thinking that the CFO controller's attitude towards the safety and security of SaaS replicates the ignorance that HR had 3 or 4 years ago. I mean, they are up to speed.
Certainly getting there, that's for sure. But you got to remember, all these things about software replacement cycles, these things take years to unfold. So we're not going to see, I want to temper my prediction, we won't see like 80% market share shift in 1 year here, but we'll see a few percentage points, and it just keeps building every year.
That's great. Okay, let's bring Vinny in. Poor Vinny hasn't gotten to say a word with his first prediction. HR will increasingly be expected to find useful analytical nuggets in the workforce like UPS did about left turns on delivery routes. There's a mountain of social, sensory, financial, and other data waiting to be mashed up with HR data. Vinny.
Well, Bill, first of all, you're very modest. You've been very modest. You've been giving us all the credit. I don't know if viewers knew this is your 100th panel. You're quite an icon in this industry.
Well, thank you, Vinny.
I'm honored to be on this panel. Let's think back to 90 panels ago, Bill. I mean, think back 10, 15 years ago. In personal life, we used to envy what corporate life had, right? In the last few years, personal life has almost become a harbinger of what follows in the enterprise. So if you look at data, I mean, it's everywhere in our personal lives. I fly Southwest quite a bit. Every month, the Spirit magazine, the airline magazine, has 4 pages of factoids. Different aspects of life. If you watch ESPN, they have a whole bunch of shows, numbers don't lie. If you look at our personal health routines, Fitbit, Nike Fuel, etc. I mean, we're becoming a very data-rich society. Same thing in the enterprise. We have so much sensory data, we have so much social data, we have so much mobile data, and that's starting to infiltrate HR decisions. So you mentioned UPS, right? UPS a few years ago saw that at left turns, there's a lot of fuel being wasted in idling. There was a lot of
left turn because there's another lane coming at
Correct.
them. They have to wait.
Correct.
Okay.
At least in the U.S. Certainly not in the U.K., et cetera. And so they eliminated in their routing as many left turns as possible. Now they've taken that forward. They have a system called Orion, a very sophisticated scheduling system. I happened to meet a couple of UPS executives last week, and they were saying, sophisticated as it is, employees, drivers, often ignore the guidance that the system gives them because they know, the gradient of certain streets is unsafe, certainly in the winter. They know that if they back up on a certain street, they're going to hit something. So HR issues, employee issues, are starting to meld with system-generated data issues. Kraft has a unit called Mondelez, spun out of a unit called Mondelez, which looked at, they used to have merchandisers do an honor-based reporting of time and expense, time and delivery routes and so on. They assigned GPS units to each one of them, collected about 4 billion data points, came up with much more sophisticated scheduling of their employees and their merchandisers. Verizon is starting to share data about what audiences do in sports arenas. So the arenas can assign security and concession stands, much more precisely where crowds are going. So HR increasingly is having to face up to all this mobile, sensory, social data that we're collecting, and we just can't do it the old-fashioned way. And it's affecting every aspect of recruiting, employee assignments, employee management, etc.
I think there are two really important, separate but interwoven issues in what you're describing. First is that if we're going to move analytics, if we're going to move a lot of insight to the point of sale, to the manager, to the individual, we have to move with it the context, the guidance, the advisory. We have to tell them not only, here's some numbers, but what do you do with them? Because we can't possibly expect everyone to be as clever as the folks who came up with the algorithms in the first place. And that is putting a new set of competency requirements on our workforce and on our managers. That's one piece of the puzzle. Second piece of the puzzle is behavioral. How do we get people to take advantage of this new analytics, this new data, this new guidance, and not fight it? How do we get folks to collaborate around the data and not say, well, my tried and true way, I've been at this for 30 years and I can do it?
No, that's a very good point, and it's going to take some time.
Yes.
Right? So there's a Silicon Valley firm called NAC, which allows you to have a candidate play a game. Okay, and based on the game, it's picking up personality traits.
Absolutely.
Which then they say predicts performance a lot better. Now, most HR people will say, boy, that's risky. Do I want to try it? So it's going to take some time for these analytics to replace gut feel and traditional driver routing at a UPS, for example. I mean, God, they trust their instincts a lot more than the data, right?
But I think
same thing for HR.
I think we're also, though, going to have to make some explicit change in policy and practice. We need comp plans that incent that kind of collaborative behavior. We have to rethink human resource management for this world.
Well, both of you guys are kind of dance around something back in Texas we call wanting and getting are two different things, okay? And we may have the ability now to capture all this incredible kind of like sensor-driven information and the like. But what you really want to do with it, I think, could be a real challenge. There's some ethical issues, like where people are wearing ID badges that track everywhere they go and what they're doing every minute of their life or whatever for work. We've seen all the issues around Google Glass starting to surface. The question here is, I think, the technology is moving and evolving way faster than I think a lot of HR organizations have evolved in their thinking around how they're going to take advantage of this. And just these analytic deals are just the tip of the iceberg, I think, of what's coming up.
And Brian, just to your point, I think the societal trends, that's why I started off with the personal life is so rich with data. Mm-hmm. That quite often is making some of the privacy issues less of an issue than it would have been 10 years ago. Now you go to Europe, certainly different attitudes towards privacy and so on. But I think our personal lives are just exposing us to so much data that as employees, as managers, we're a little more prepared to accept it.
If we have time later, I want to hear other examples, like the UPS example. I love that example. Naomi, we're going to your second prediction, which we've softened a tad for delicate sensibilities. What you originally wrote was that HR must clean up their crap coding structures, outmoded or irrational business rules, and process flows that are from the beginning of time, rather than reincarnating all of this sludge in their next generation HRMS talent management. I know you feel strongly about this, so tell us.
I do. I almost got fired from my first job as a programmer trainee because we were automating a set of procedures that were heavily manual. And I started asking questions. Here I have my shiny new computer. Why am I replicating exactly what had been done pre-computer? I thought I could reinvent this process. And my then supervisor basically told me, sit down, shut up, or you're out of here. That's been going on ever
I'd have paid a
since.
ticket to hear that.
But it's been going on ever since. That the first.
I thought you used a different word for crap. That's why
When we started having packages, and HR was one of the first areas that we had packages for, we built these user exit things so that we could write code to replicate whatever mishigas they had, that being a technical word for craziness.
Yeah.
When we went to client server, and PeopleSoft is a great example of this, because it was shiny new technology with this wonderful new people code that anybody could write, and we wrote it. We wrote endless amounts of it. You have 27 work weeks? No problem. You have more job codes than you have employees? No problem. Whatever you had, we would replicate. And we've done this over and over and over again. We have process flows that may have made sense 40 years ago. We've got coding structures that conflate physical locations where work gets done with organizational entities through which work gets done. We have a mess. And unless we take this moment to get it straightened out, all your great analytics are going to be based on really bad data, and we'll be hiring the morons faster than we're hiring them today. And they will overwhelm us. We absolutely cannot build predictive analytics on the quality of data that we have, not in every situation, but in many.
I think, Naomi, the big difference is a lot of the new data is new data. It's
Yes,
external,
it is. I agree.
Sensors are not used to the processes that you're talking about. Social data is very, very honest data from consumers and
Directly from people.
exactly. So some of that is being conditioned by the new data.
The new data still has to know who you are,
True.
okay? And if I'm calling you, if I'm forcing your name into first name, middle name, last name, because I haven't thought through the diversity of people, if I don't know what role you're supposed to be in today, and I'm mashing up sensor data with you, but I think you're doing a different role, I'm going to have a muddle.
Sure.
Okay, well, I'm going to wait.
Take it away,
you
Brian.
Guys, you
Sit up
guys,
straight,
you guys
Brian.
are just looking at this so parochially right now. I mean, so limited, and your visor's too tight. or
Says the
something.
man with a strong Texas accent.
I mean, I sat down with one of my clients and we started mapping out what do the processes in HR actually look like today. And just for grins and giggles, we went on Google and we printed out process flows. You can find these process maps all over on the internet. And they were all the old world. They were the world well before 2008, before Al Gore invented the internet. I mean, these were antiquated looking processes. And then we asked, like, college kids, how do you get recruited for an internship or what have you? And it turns out they use probably 35 different mobile, cloud, data-driven, database-rich kind of systems that aren't on any process flow I see in any HR department or any HR vendor's process maps. You know, you talk to a college kid, it's like, well, they get the notification by email or a text message. They go check out the company on Facebook by posting a question to their colleagues, like, hey, what do you know about Naomi's firm here? And they do, they check out their own reputation on the internet through like Reputation Defender, and it just goes on and on and on. They're using all of these different data stores, and this is the way the process looks today. And the process will be radically different tomorrow because the speed with which these mobile apps keep getting created and these new cloud-driven databases that these mobile apps use are just popping up all over the place. We are going from one old, internally focused world of HR processes to a new world that's where processes come and go daily and the components change by the person that uses it.
And I don't think there's much divergence between your point of view and
Not at
Naomi's
all.
point of view.
Not at all, but there is a sort of a nasty little wormhole in it. and that is that the regulatory agencies around the world, state by state, have not kept up. They're still at 1973. And so somewhere in the middle of all of this, the poor HR person has to preside over some flavor of compliance. And so no matter what else is going on, they feel that responsibility. And unless senior management wants to relieve them of that responsibility, all that modern activity, which I couldn't agree with more, goes thud when someone says, and where's your I-9? Where's your right to work documentation? Where is the affirmative action report that we have to generate? So somehow we have to be able to marry this enormous amount of innovation that's going on with some thud, which is required. I'd like to see the regulations, keep up, but they're never going to.
Right. We're going to move on to the next question because I don't think you two disagree.
No, not at all.
And we want to focus on disagreements rather than on agreements.
Just to Naomi's final point.
Quickly.
I see the regulators actually under a lot of pressure. And I'm going to cite the example of the Google autonomous car.
Mm-hmm.
You won't believe the number of townships that are starting to look at how do our green lights change, because now we'll have a mixed mode. Some will be autonomous, some will be with people. What is going to impact our revenues, because speeding fines now may be history, right? Regulators aren't as slow as you think anymore.
Well, I don't think they're as slow as they used to be, but I think they are very hard-pressed indeed to keep up with the kind of speed of innovation that Brian's describing.
They're reacting, no question.
Yeah. Brian, we're going to go on to your second prediction, namely that the worlds of big data and financial accounting will really start to collide in 2014. I think you've started to introduce that already, as more companies try to marry transactional data with other big data. An important point, CFOs will want better tools to manage all this with one system and one tool set.
Well, let's start off with on Black Friday, I bought myself a portable hard drive, and I paid $39 for 1 terabyte hard drive, which when I started in the IT stuff back in my introduction, I think you referenced the Paleolithic era or something like that. That would have been an astronomically amazing kind of stat that nobody would have believed.
And the size of a washing machine, if you could get one.
Yeah. So I tell you that because the world of IT has been a world of constraints for eons. We've had to break up things, and financial systems, we've had sub-ledgers because you couldn't put everything in a single, ledger. And I go on and on and on. And what we've learned is that in a world where IT is no longer constrained, we don't have to do things the way we've been doing them in the past. And as a result, the smart players have tried not to do things like bolt on, for example, in memory technology to an existing like RDBMS, relational database management kind of systems architecture. They now do everything with the new technology, and that's rather amazing because the new technology doesn't have the redundancy, it doesn't have the latency issues, it doesn't have the errors and all that other kind of stuff that the old world had where you bolted everything all together. So what the new buyer wants is they want their financial systems, other transactional data, all the operational data, and all the external big data feeds. They want it all in one spot. Everything is going to one. And that's where they want to do all the reporting, all the analysis. That's where they want to get it all. And you can see this coming down the pike. And at the same time, you can see vendors who are trying to hang on to the past. They're still trying to get that refrigerator-sized or whatever hard drive to work with something else. So I think we're going to see the end of the old financial systems, the old data warehouses and the like. We're going to see a different kind of unified system that has that particularly embraces all this big external information as part of the puzzle as well.
Benny.
Brian, I was trained as a CPA. You and I did work at big four firms and so on.
You knew Luca Pacioli back in 1495.
The guy who created double entry bookkeeping?
You were right there by his side.
That's
if I'm
right.
Yeah.
But honestly, the financial function has lost its credibility in terms of reporting and business intelligence, so on. The last recession, if you talk to most CEOs, they were sideswiped by a huge margin, right? I mean, everybody missed their forecasts. After spending billions in business intelligence and databases and so on, the finance function did not deliver. So when I see the new world of analytics, frankly, I'm seeing much more exciting stuff from asset managers that are using predictive analytics for maintenance. I'm seeing marketing folks, do a lot more social analytics. I'm seeing operational research folks at UPS doing scheduling and so on. That's where the real, somewhat narrow, not the big database in the sky, but narrow applications are where a lot of the business value is coming. Will that eventually merge into some big database in the sky? Possibly. But I see short term, HR analytics, people analytics, customer analytics, fan analytics in sports, etc., being far more exciting and not often being driven by the CFO.
If I may add one more thought here, there's a whole rash of companies for which 70% of all of their expenses are people related. If not labor cost, it's provisioning the people. And for those kinds of companies, marrying the HR kinds of data with the financial implications of those HR decisions is absolutely critical. It's really pushing two groups together who didn't even like each other very much. It used to be that they negotiated around who's going to be in charge of payroll. But it's much bigger than that now, and I'm starting to see conversations between CFOs and CHROs that I never would have seen 10 years ago. Really trying to understand how the decisions we make about where we're going to locate something and what kind of people we're going to have and what we're going to buy, what we're going to build, when we use contingent, when we use a durable workforce. The financial implications of that is forcing HR executives to become far more financially literate than they ever were.
I think what the point you're making is people are learning to triangulate more.
Yes.
So Workday, Salesforce data, employee data, customer data is being triangulated to come up with new types of analysis, insights and performance analysis and so on that we couldn't do a few years ago.
Yeah, I'm going to end on the happy note of CFOs and CHROs actually caring more about what the other person is doing.
Starting to wear those kind of matching T-shirts where part of the phrase is on one and part of the phrase is on the other.
Great. Vinny, we're going to move to your next prediction. And it's triggered a lot of talk in HR circles lately, namely that new wave manufacturing, pioneered in Germany and Japan, is moving to the U.S., which will suddenly confront HR with managing man-machine interactions with humanoid robots, machine learning, and even overrides of human decisions by machines. Tell us about that.
Again, so let's go back to the personal life, right? Because I see that as a harbinger of what happens in the enterprise. 2 weeks ago, Jeff Bezos showed Charlie Rose his autonomous, his drone, which can do home deliveries, right? You think about that, and if I was a UPS employee or a FedEx employee, I'd go, oh my God, right? You look at Google with its driverless cars, right? Again, if I'm a taxi driver, I'm going, where's my job a few years from now? If you look at Siri, right? Transcription. If you look at Vonage voicemail. I mean, these are all things that are coming to us as individuals. So why do we not expect that to happen in the enterprise? In the enterprise, it's happening in many different ways. And frankly, consumers seem to prefer not dealing so much with, service agents and so on. So we're seeing a lot more self-service. If you go to a Zappos shoe warehouse, you actually see employees who are happy to have these robots go get them the stuff from different locations. And then they can check and package and so on. Okay, so the next generation of technology, even though it looks scary, is actually fairly complementary to human interaction. And in some cases, as we've seen with Amazon's new Kindle, the human interaction is better than having Siri, right? So I'm less worried about people saying, oh my God, it's going to kill all the jobs. I see it as much more complementary. I do see the HR role growing tremendously because they have to now go talk to the unions and say, yeah, I may lose some jobs here, however, we're going to create some new jobs here. Okay, I see the HR role as being much more nurturing of, guys, we can't stop this happening here. However, think of the benefits that's going to happen once robots do the more, tedious tasks and so on. Okay, so it's accelerating. I'm not personally afraid of it, and I think HR has a big role in calming people down about, the impact.
I only ask facetiously, will the robots be managed as capital equipment or as human beings?
There's a lot of good questions in this. And if we go back a few years, I was sort of in the forefront of urging the HR community to embrace the contingent workforce and not just let it be something procurement dealt with, okay? And it's taken a long time, but today in most companies there is collaboration between procurement and HR on the contingent workforce. This has some of the same elements, that if we just leave it to procurement, it's plant and equipment, let's not worry about it. I think HR gets itself into a whole set of issues with the current workforce, but I think it's more profound than that. And while it may not be an issue for us, I think it is an issue for your children, your children's children, because these robots are coming. And there's a great deal of work that they will be able to do that is not just unskilled work, but highly skilled work. A good example is in surgery. When surgeons who'd been trained on the open cut had to do arthroscopic surgery, the vast majority of them retired. They were not able to retrain. We now have, if you've seen it done, and I have, robotic surgery where the surgeon is in a different room with his hands in the robot thing and the robot's doing the cutting. Well, the implication of that is the retraining is just not easy for older, more experienced surgeons. So I do think we're going to see a pretty tremendous displacement of the workforce over this. Not next week, not next month, 10 years, 20 years. HR has to prepare now for the role that it wants in managing those relationships. I don't mean relationships with the robots themselves. Although some of what we're seeing suggests that work assignments, if we have a team where we've got humanoid robots and humans, we're divvying up the work, we have to include those robots in the work assignment process. No. We may have to include them in some of the learning because we want to reskill. So, I think that we've only begun to scratch the surface on what the workplace will be like when, half or more of the workforce doesn't look like us.
And,
so Naomi,
and what they'll be having for lunch is really my worry. We have to wrap this one up very quickly.
Sure. I was just taking a point about younger generation workers. My son, I want him to be in the technology business, like every technologist does. He's taken an interest in chemistry. Frankly, new sciences are opening up, right? Nanotech, next generation agrotech, and so on. So new skills are opening up. So even if information technology takes over many of our tasks, I think the future, at least to me, is a lot more optimistic than people make it out to be.
Well, it'll be very good for the bright, well-educated.
Well, that's unfortunately obvious about so many things. We're going to move on to your final prediction for 2014, Naomi. And that is, since the vast majority of private sector organizations are now inherently global, having a truly global HRMS talent management platform, as you pointed out before, without U.S.-centric addresses, will be a basic requirement for both middle market and large enterprise organizations.
This is really part of a huge change that's happened in my career. Because when I first started working, the vast majority of U.S.-centric companies did business in the U.S. Many to most had no overseas operations. That was really uncommon in the 60s. That has changed dramatically. And it's, today it's very common, even for companies with just a few hundred employees, to have a sales office in another country, to have a software development lab in Bulgaria, to be taking advantage of a call center in India, perhaps. We have to be internationalists today. And the challenge is that there's an awful lot of software around, HR software around, that is absolutely not global. Never mind that it, forces everybody to have first name, middle name, last name. I can't tell you the number of vendors I've met with over the last few years that when I ask about compliance, because the software ought to sort of do that, okay? They say we have configuration tools, and compliance is really at the discretion of the customer. We're not in the compliance business. Well, that's just hogwash. If you're going to deliver, staffing applications for Germany, you ought to accommodate the basics of German compliance. So I think even companies that only do business in the U.S., they have Hispanic workers, they have Asian American workers. Their name structures are different. We ought to be respecting that. But the minute you go across a border, the old approach of building for the U.S. or building for Germany for that matter, and then localizing. God, I hate that concept. But anyway, localizing. Eventually, you've localized and you've got this spaghetti mess. You have to build that base from the beginning to be global. And even now, at the very highest end, we have these capabilities, but not for the middle market, and they need it desperately.
Absolutely. Vinny, your thoughts?
I think global HR is still a very immature art. And I'm going to cite a couple of examples. If you look at the European Union, right, so much promise, but if you look at the actual implementation, Eastern Europeans have had a really hard time. And even though they're engineers, very good with their hands, being accepted in Western Europe. The Northern Europeans still look down on Southern Europeans' work ethic and so on. So, even within that small community, there have been challenges. If you look at the technology business, right, I'm going to cite IBM, SAP, and Indian vendors, right? In each case, 60-70% of the revenue comes from outside their home country. But if you look just below the surface, you could see the tensions in the workforce, at IBM or SAP between Waldorf and Palo Alto, or the Indian firms where CEO is based in India and 90% of the revenue comes from the U.S., right? We still are very early in terms of managing global workforces.
I think there's really two issues. One is our system should not be the impediment. And so I'm a strong proponent of the systems having the capabilities. A completely separate issue is the rate at which we can acculturate, right. The rate at which we can learn to collaborate cross-culturally. That's much slower. But I sure don't want anybody running up against a systems constraint.
Fair enough.
Okay, we're going to move to Brian's last peek into the future. Record numbers of CPAs will retire, and new people will enter finance, while traditional technology is being turned on its head, as you've described. When a new generation of accountants arrive, will they accept their predecessors' antiquated tool sets? Not to mention the new data scientists, big data IT technologists, and all the weird folks who are going to be there for the first time?
Well, I know this is going to kill Vinny because he's going to have to put his abacus up, but I did get some interesting stats I found from the Pennsylvania Institute of Certified Public Accountants, and the number is actually rather staggering. 50% of their membership is over 50 years old. More than 50% of partners in accounting firms are retiring in 10 years. 75% of the professional staff in these firms could retire in the next 15 years. And this is one of two big forces that are colliding right now in the space. One is the aging demographics of the accounting industry, and the other one is the incredibly rapid advancement of what's occurring in the technology in that space. And in an industry or a profession that hasn't had a reputation for being the fastest to adopt to new things, new ideas, new concepts, this is going to create a real collision. And Bill hinted correctly at the beginning here about there are going to be new people in the finance organization. They're going to be data scientists who maybe don't have an accounting background. And they're going to be trying to make sense. They're going to do some of the triangulation of data. They're going to be looking at big data sets from customer sentiment analysis kind of information that isn't necessarily audited. I mean, how do you audit a tweet stream? And, and what does it really mean when you do it? And you're going to compare that against our financial results of our company. And you're going to produce some kind of report out of that. So I think what we're going to see is a whole series of new tools, technologies, capability, and people coming into these finance organizations, and they're going to push innovation and creativity, which are two words that you never usually heard in the same sentence about accounting unless a jail term was involved. And so what we're going to end up with is a world that, that will be very foreign, very different, very scary in some regards to people. And the way you're going to have to get around it is a lot of professionals are going to have to periodically get out from behind their accounting office desk in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and they're going to have to become cosmopolitan. They're going to have to go to like Silicon Valley or go to events. They're going to have to see what's coming in their industry and in their clients' industries very quickly, and maybe ahead of the curve even before the profession can figure out what it's going to do about it, because they're going to have to build an opinion around this stuff pretty quick.
We're
The
just
good
going to
news
have.
is the demographics are on your side. The old farts will retire, and the new ones will take over. And that's going to happen not just in the CPA world, but across all the professions.
Unfortunately, Vinny's going to take our time in response on this one.
Brian, the accounting firms have traditionally been the source of the finance CFO organization, right? They churn people out and they can go work at controllers and so on. That's, even though it may be declining, I'm actually discouraged because in the last 15 years, especially after Sarbanes-Oxley, I find accounting firms have become more and more insular. They are the people who are scaring people don't adopt cloud because they still don't feel secure. They haven't adopted for their own practices, automation to do, massive risk analysis and so on. So in a way, this infusion of external staff may be healthier for the profession. The accounting firms, if they dwindle in impact on the CFO organization, is not a bad thing, given the accounting firm of the last 2 decades.
Good. Thank you. We're going to our last prediction before we go to questions. And that is from Vinny. With mobile devices exploding, HR will increasingly be expected to be involved in BYOD, bring your own device policies, policies on protection of corporate data, better integration of mobile apps into enterprise systems.
I mean, as Workday customers have seen with all the mobile apps, huge opportunities, right? People can do time and expense sheets on the mobile device. They can get the reports. Workday has reports like global headcount and compensation analysis available on the mobile devices. So huge opportunities opening up with all these new devices. But frankly, consumerization is also bringing a whole bunch of risks which HR and finance needs to be much more cognizant of. So, I fly Delta quite a bit. Delta has introduced Nokia Lumias to their flight attendants, and they can scan it's a point of sale for them. Okay.
A Lumia is a tablet? I don't know it.
It's a little mobile phone.
Okay.
They've also introduced new Microsoft Surface tablets to pilots. Okay, which is all goodness, except if you talk to individual Delta employees. I talked to one who said, "Aren't you excited about your new mobile device?" She said, "It's great, but when I get down terra firma,
Can't use
it's a break. It's a break because Delta won't pay for my usage on the ground." Right? The pilots are saying, "God, I wish they had adopted an iPad." So consumerization with all its choices is actually creating a little bit of conflict in the employee workforce. And then there are a whole bunch of policy issues. I mean, we're seeing commingling of private and corporate data. I mean, if you take a photograph on your iPhone, it gets synced to Facebook. If you put a calendar entry on Google Calendar on your mobile device, it goes to the Google data center. If you flip a page on a Kindle, it knows what page you're on because it's trying to sync to other devices. Okay. All this is being captured and stored in some corporate database that NSA and other agencies are privy to now, right? So HR has come up with a whole bunch of new policies that protect us from all the new risks consumerization is bringing into the enterprise.
All I want is for Apple to tell me how many of my iTunes subscribers to my radio show actually listen to the automatic download, but they won't tell me that.
why are you so special?
You know, the points you've been raising, I think, are key. There's another whole set of issues. We have folks now working with real apps. They're not just doing an address change or, some little thing. They're out there roaming around, making hiring decisions, making comp allocation decisions, and we want them to make those decisions very effectively. So we have to get to them a whole lot of information that historically was not pumped point of sale. Historically, you got an email with a bunch of instructions on, merit increases, and you worked on it sort of in your office, and if you had a question, now we've got a workforce that's untended, and we're expecting them to do some pretty important things. And the apps are catching up, but they're not there yet. We talked earlier about not having the greatest underlying data in some cases. We have to get that a lot better. And I, for one, am concerned that we have not done a very good job, technology aside, of sort of coaching the workforce and managers as well on just good behavior. So, for example, when you're sitting on the plane, and now, of course, we can keep our devices on, and you're reviewing, executive comp, maybe you shouldn't be doing it where everybody can see.
Again, huge opportunity for HR and finance. Maybe not, not in the traditional system sense, but all these
Broad
new
policy,
challenges
yes.
Right.
are opening up opportunities.
I agree.
This actually opens us up perfectly to a good question that we got from someone out in the audience.
Only one good question?
No, we have a couple of good questions that are actually all around the same theme, which I think is entirely appropriate. They're all around HR and finance together, opposed, working together. I'm going to shoot the first one at Brian, but you all should feel like you can comment on it. And we've been asked, how should an HR exec think about the relationship and synergies between HR and financial management, which I'm sure they haven't thought about ever. Most.
How should they look at the synergies? Okay.
Or, maybe the question is, how do they get tight with each other?
They start lunching.
Well, that'll help, but that'll help at least to kick off the
CFO
dialogue.
Yeah.
But I
picks up
think,
the check.
but I think one of the most fascinating things I've watched are people trying to get together and figure out how to solve very thorny business problems that you would use an analytics tool to crack the code on. And I'll give it, and so a classic question that impacts HR and operational parts of the business is, how do we predict when somebody's going to leave the firm? Mm-hmm. And you start probing, you start coming up with a bunch of different hypotheses. That's, I think, the place you want to start with, is you want to get these people to start volunteering their theories on what they think are the drivers behind those kind of things. Then you can start building out the analytics, and you're going to be pulling data from both finance and HR. You're going to find out things like, Naomi exercised all her stock options, Bill's taken all his vacation, and all these... and all these other kind of points to point out maybe something's going on. And I think that what's even more fascinating to me are watching some of the new kind of things popping up with some of the new add-on HR technologies can predict, like, Vinny here's updated his LinkedIn profile 6 times this week, and he's only done it 6 times previously in his life, or Bill just bought a house in Denver. Maybe he's open to a relocation or a business or a job change or something like that. So there's a bunch of these clues that we're now leaving all over the world on cloud systems all over the place. And I think that's maybe a great place to start the dialogue, is how can we use some of these new information pockets to be smarter about our business and our workforce, many of which actually will have some financial implications to the company.
One of the things that I was always astonished by was that although CFOs, close to the numbers, know all about their labor costs, they don't always have a good handle on the ripple effects of HR decisions on those costs. And so that's another, I love lunches, and the other guy should pay. But I do think that there's any number of...
CFO to buy you lunch?
I do indeed. There's any number of topics of that type, whether it's predicting retention and understanding the real cost of the loss of of expertise, or talking about the ripple effects when we make a push here on some kind of an HR decision, the financial implications downstream is another good topic. But whatever else is going on, these people have to know each other. They have to learn to trust each other. They have to build the kinds of relationships that historically they really may not have had.
Bill, let me take a slightly negative approach to this.
Feel free, I love negative.
Right? If you were to talk to CEOs where the excitement on technology is, it's clearly not in the back office. They're moved into product engineering, technology and product engineering. So, make my car more smarter, make my smoke detector, more technologically savvy. So, we can go with a consumer base that is much more technologically savvy, right? Or they're interested in new business models, new marketing that is allowing them to generate more revenue. To me, HR and finance expectations are so low in terms of technological innovation that frankly the CFO and HR need to sit down and say, I'm going to show these guys. They should get together, if nothing else, just to surprise the executive suite. I mean, I hate to put it negatively, but the expectations are extremely low of both of them. And that in itself should be an incentive to say, let's work together and surprise some folks.
Well, that's great, because that actually brings up a second good question that we have just 2 minutes for, which is how do HR and finance departments need to reinvent themselves to take advantage of technology? I mean, what do they have to prove? What do they have to do to get it?
Whenever I am sitting with a CEO who is trying to get at what the real value of HR is, I say, sir or madam, is what you do...
We're all confused about that with anybody.
Is what you do a driver of business results? Does what you do matter? Oh, yes, they say. Of course it matters. And I say, if you were better at what you do, if you made better decisions, if you were more effective as a leader, would that have a positive impact on the company? Absolutely. That's what human resource management is. It's getting you to be a better CEO. Once they understand that it's not about compliance and record keeping, they have the necessary stuff to get done. But when you were talking about innovation and product designers are human resources.
Sure.
Finding better ones, incenting them properly, making sure the corporate culture is one that encourages them to collaborate. All those kinds of things that we talk about, at their core, are HR and or finance decisions. So it's not like we have to be whole new people. We just have to get out there and help people to connect the best of what we do with the business results.
We have to sell harder.
Well, I don't know if to sell harder. We have to be more explicit about the actual impact on business results.
Let me take a slightly different viewpoint, which is, Naomi mentioned contingent labor. HR didn't step up, procurement did. I see every 2 years an opportunity open up for HR, and it just doesn't move out of its comfort zone. So at this point, robotics is an area where HR could step up and say, there are definite issues.
Take care of this.
Well, no, but definitely take the leadership in terms of the man-machine tension, soothing the organization, whatever. Huge opportunity for HR. Globalization is another area. I don't see HR people allowing for this smoothing of cultural differences, racial profiling, all that happens in corporations. Let's not pretend it doesn't happen, right? So, same thing with finance. They tend to be much more of everything comes to the finance function rather than going out to the operational guys and saying, how do we use predictive analytics from assets and other areas and so on? So step out of your comfort zone, it would be my advice.
You're a lucky man, Vinny. You're going to have the final word on this panel. Okay, we've got 3 important slides before calling it a wrap. Here's how you can contact us, as well as follow us on Twitter. Naomi and I both have Paleolithic email domains. On Twitter, she leads this group with nearly 11,000 followers. Vinny and I are sort of middle 4 figures in followers, and Brian clearly has better things to do with his time, or else he'd have a lot more followers, and also a much better picture posted on Twitter. You're much more handsome than your picture on Twitter, Brian. And if you want more information about Workday, here's their website, workday.com, where you can learn tons. When you get your link to the replay, feel free to share it with colleagues who weren't as clever as you were to register for it. Or maybe they were taking PTO today. So thanks for joining us here today for this historic studio webcast. I thank all the guests. Have a great holiday season, and see you next December for Predict and Prepare 2015. We're done today.